The first thing Mira Vasquez noticed about the alien planet was how much it looked like a quarry in Wales. Not metaphorically. Not in the way that exhausted soldiers sometimes said that every frozen hellhole started to look the same after a while. Literally, the pale gray rock, the flat overcast sky pressing down like a lid, the absolute absence of anything green or curved or kind. She had done a geology survey in the Brecon Beacons once, right out of university, and she remembered standing in a slate pit and thinking, this is what the moon would look like if the moon had ambitions. This planet had the same energy. She stepped out of the survey pod and let the airlock cycle behind her. The atmosphere was breathable. Just barely, the kind of thin that made your lungs work a little harder than they should. And the gravity was close enough to standard that she only felt it in her knees after the first 20 minutes. The sensor array on her wrist confirmed what the pre-drop scans had said. No toxins, no pathogen, no biological signatures within 2 kilometers. Technically safe. She had learned to distrust technically safe. The pod had come down hard, a controlled crash, which was the polite way the Survey Corps described any landing that left the pilot bruised and the hull intact. And it sat now at a slight tilt on the quarry floor, one landing strut bent at an angle that was not in the engineering specs. She did a slow circuit of it, running her fingers along the hull seams, checking the heat shielding. The strut was bent, but it would hold. Probably. She made a note in her field log and then stood still for a moment, listening. Silence. Not the comfortable silence of countryside or deep night, but the pressurized silence of a place that had never had anything in it worth making noise about. No wind, no insects, no distant water. Just the faint sound of her own breathing and the soft tick of the pod's cooling hull. She pulled out her mapping equipment and started walking. The survey assignment was straightforward. 3 days on surface, geological and atmospheric sampling, check the potential mineral readings that the orbital scan had flagged, come home. The flagged deposits were 17 kilometers northwest, which in this terrain meant a long, dull walk over flat gray, nothing's punctuated by the occasional low ridge of rock. She had done worse. She had done this particular brand of worse so many times that she had developed an internal rating system for planetary bleakness, with Earth's own Atacama Desert as a baseline 5. And the methane flats of Kepler 62e as a legendary 10. This planet, she decided after 40 minutes of walking, was a solid 7. Interesting enough to keep you alert, empty enough to make you philosophical. She was composing the opening paragraph of her mental field report, dry, factual, quietly despairing in the way that all good geological survey reports were, when she saw them, 2 figures, standing on a ridge about 300 meters ahead, outlined against the gray sky. Watching her, Mira stopped walking. The figures did not move. She checked her sensors again. They were showing clear. She looked at the figures again. They were definitely there. Bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, wearing what looked from this distance like some kind of layered armor or exosuit. One was taller than the other. Both were very, very still. She made a deliberate choice not to run back to the pod. Running communicated fear, and fear was information. Instead, she kept walking. She adjusted her heading slightly, not toward the figures but not away from them either. A kind of diplomatic oblique approach that said, I have noticed you, and I am not alarmed, and I have places to be. The taller figure stepped forward to the edge of the ridge as she drew within comfortable shouting distance. It raised one arm in a gesture that, on Earth, would have meant stop. She stopped. The figure descended the ridge in long, deliberate strides. Up close, the exosuit was more elaborate than she had thought. Segmented carapace, some kind of iridescent material in the joints that caught the flat gray light and threw it back in colors she didn't have words for. The face was covered, or possibly the face was the covering, she couldn't tell. The other figure stayed on the ridge, watching. The tall one stopped 3 meters away. There was a sound. Not quite a voice, not quite static, something that her translation module would need a moment to process. She watched the module's readout scroll. Then it spoke in something close enough to language that she got most of it. I am bad, it said. Mira waited to see if more was coming. It wasn't. Okay, she said. The figure seemed to stiffen slightly, which might have been a fence or might have been how it breathed. The translation module was still working on the nuances. It spoke again, and this time the module had enough to work with. You do not seem alarmed. I am processing, she said honestly. Give me a second. She was running through the standard contact protocols, the ones drilled into every Survey Corps officer, until they could recite them in their sleep. Establish non-threat. Establish communication. Establish intent. Do not escalate. Do not de-escalate so fast that you seem dismissive. This last one was harder than it sounded, because her instinct right now was almost purely dismissive, and she was having to actively sit on it. I am Veth, the tall figure said. This is Orm. It gestured back at the ridge, where the smaller figure gave what might have been a nod. We have been waiting, for me, for a human. Mira took a slow breath. She looked around at the quarry landscape, at the flat gray sky, at the two figures who had apparently been waiting on a ridge on a planet with no breathable atmosphere worth mentioning, and no discernible reason to be here. For a human. She looked at her sensor array, which continued to show no other biological signatures. She looked back at the taller figure. How long have you been here? She asked. A pause while the module translated and then retranslated. 4 of your cycles. 4 days, roughly. Or possibly 4 years. The module flagged temporal specificity as uncertain. That's a long time to wait on a rock, she said. It is necessary, said Veth. We have a plan. Mira looked at her watch, which was a habit she had kept from before the Survey Corps, when watches had meant something. Tell me about the plan, she said. What followed was one of the more unusual conversations of her professional career, which was itself an unusual career, in a species with an unusual relationship to unusual situations. She had done first contact before, twice both times with species that turned out to be more interested in her geological samples than in humanity as a concept. But she had never done first contact with someone who opened with a statement of intent to commit a crime. Veth explained the plan in stages, with Orm occasionally descending from the ridge to add supplementary information, and then ascending again, as though the ridge were his designated location, and he was only permitted to leave it briefly. The plan was this: the Veth-Orm Collective. She was still not sure if they were a species, a faction, a partnership, or something for which she had no category, intended to destabilize the iron-nickel core of the Earth using a resonance device they had developed over what they estimated to be several decades of work. Once destabilized, the core would be replaced with a proprietary drive mechanism of their own design. Earth, thus retrofitted, would become a mobile platform, a planet ship, under their control. When Veth finished, it stood very still, in the manner of something that expected a reaction. Mira had been writing in her field log throughout. She looked up. When are you planning to start? She asked. The still posture fractured slightly. We had hoped to discuss a timeline. I'm asking about your current schedule, she said. Do you have a start date? Another pause. Orm had descended the ridge again and was now standing slightly behind Veth, which the module flagged as a submissive positioning, though it noted moderate confidence only. We do not have a fixed start date, Veth said slowly. We wish to warn you first, give you the opportunity to prevent it. That's considerate, Mira said. She capped her stylus and looked at them both steadily. Can I ask why? The question seemed to genuinely stump them. There was a long exchange between Veth and Orm in the untranslated register. Fast, sibilant, overlapping, and then Veth turned back to her. It is more interesting, it said finally. If someone tries to stop us. Mira thought about this. She looked at the gray sky. She looked at the ridge, which had a small pile of equipment at its base that she had initially dismissed as geological formation, but now recognized as the accumulation of people who had been camped somewhere for a while. A kind of strewn entropy, the debris field of waiting. You've been out here 4 days, she said, waiting for someone to come stop you. Yes. And nobody came, no, until me. Yes. She stood up straighter and looked at them with the particular attention she gave to things that were structurally interesting. It was the same attention she gave to an unusual rock formation or a mineral deposit that didn't match the surrounding substrate. Careful, detailed, without judgment. I'm a geological surveyor, she said. I'm not a defense officer. I'm not with any military or government body. I'm here to take rock samples. Silence. I can file a report when I get back, she continued. And someone appropriate will follow up. It might take a few weeks. We have a process. Orm made a sound that her module translated tentatively as distress. Weeks, said Veth. Standard turnaround for a field report flagged as priority 1. You'd be a priority 1, she added, which she meant as encouragement. That's the highest category. We cannot wait weeks. How much resource do you have left? She asked. Not tactically, she was genuinely curious. Another exchange between them. Then 12 of your days, perhaps 14. That's plenty of time, she said. I'll put it in the report tonight. Flag it urgent. Someone will be in touch. She opened her field log again and made a note. I'll need your contact frequency for the follow-up. The silence that followed was the longest yet. She used it to complete her notes. Species designation unknown. Apparent non-hostile disposition. Claimed capability requires verification, technological assessment. Significant. Motivation. Unclear. Recommend xenological first contact team as follow-up. And then closed the log, and looked up to find both figures staring at her with an intensity her module could not quantify. "You are not afraid," said Veth. "I'm a little cold," she said. "We intend to relocate your planet." "You've told me," she said. "I've made a note. Someone will be in touch." She turned and began walking back toward the survey pod. After about 20 steps, she stopped and turned around. "One thing," she said. Veth and Orm were both still standing exactly where she had left them, which she took as a positive sign. The core thing, the retrofitting. "Yes?" "Has been done before," she said. "Not to Earth, but the engineering concept. You might run into some prior art issues. I'd look into that before you invest more time." She turned back around and kept walking. She heard behind her another long exchange in the untranslated register. She did not turn back. The survey pod's coffee maker was still working, which she considered, in the category of small mercies, to be a significant one. She made herself a cup, sat down at the field desk, and began to type up her report with the brisk efficiency of someone who had done a lot of reports, and understood that the quality of a report was measured not by its length, but by its precision. She wrote for 40 minutes. She flagged it Priority 1, attached her translation module logs, and sent it on the burst channel that would reach the relay station in approximately 18 hours. Then she made another cup of coffee and went to bed. In the morning, the sensors showed the two figures still on the ridge. She could see them from the pod's external camera, standing there in the flat gray light, motionless. She watched them for a while she ate breakfast. She had a theory about them. It had come to her in the middle of the night, the way theories sometimes did. Not as a flash of insight, but as a slow coalescence. Pieces arranging themselves with the patience of sedimentary rock. They had come here to this empty planet to wait for a human. They had come specifically to be stopped. Not because they wanted to be defeated, but because they wanted the interaction, the exchange, the acknowledgement, the moment of contact. The plan was almost irrelevant. The plan was the pretext for the meeting. She had seen this before on Earth, not with aliens, but with people. The ones who manufactured crises because a crisis was a way of being seen. She put down her coffee and went outside. They were both on the ridge this time, watching the pod. When she stepped out, Orm descended immediately, which now struck her as his default state. Eager, forward-leaning, slightly too quick. Veth came more slowly, with the measured pace of something that wanted to appear to have considered this. "Good morning," she said. "You slept," said Veth. "I did. How was your night?" A pause. "We do not sleep as you do." "That sounds exhausting," she said genuinely. She looked up at the ridge, then back at them. "Do you want some coffee? I have a limited supply, but I can spare a cup." The translation module required several cycles to process this offer, and then flagged the response as uncertain. It seemed, however, that the answer was yes. She made 2 cups and brought them out in the sample cups she used for geological analysis, which were technically not rated for beverages but held liquid adequately. She was not sure they could drink. She was not sure what their facial apparatus was doing at any given moment. But she set the cups down on a flat rock between them and stepped back, and after a moment Orm reached out and picked one up and held it with both hands. And something in the posture made her think of cold mornings and cupped warmth, which was a very human thing to think and probably told her more about her own pattern matching than about Orm. "Tell me about the resonance device," she said. Not threatening, curious. Veth looked at Orm. Orm looked at the coffee. "It is not complete," Veth said after a long pause. "How far along?" "The theoretical framework is complete," Veth said, with a precision that she recognized as the precision of someone who has been asked this question before, possibly by themselves. "The physical implementation requires resources we have not fully acquired. So it's a concept. It is a plan." "A concept with a timeline," she said, which was a distinction she was willing to give them. "Yes. How long have you been working on it?" Another exchange. Longer this time. She sipped her coffee and waited. 40 of your years," Veth said finally. She held very still. She had not expected that number. She'd expected something shorter, a project of ambition, a project of urgency. 40 years was something else. 40 years was the length of a career. 40 years was the time it took for a child to grow up and become someone who had spent 40 years on something. "That's a serious commitment," she said. "We believe in the plan," said Veth. She looked at them both and thought about 40 years of believing in a plan on a planet that looked like a quarry. waiting for someone to come and matter to it. She thought about what it meant to need something to be a threat, and what happened when nobody took the threat seriously. She thought about what 40 years of waiting in a gray place did to the shape of a mind. "Can I see it?" she asked. "The framework. The theoretical work." Veth's stillness shifted. Not dramatically, but she had been watching long enough now to read the micro-variations. Something in it that might have been surprise. Might have been, underneath the surprise, the particular texture of being asked instead of dismissed. Orm had put the coffee down and was looking at Veth. "You want to see the work," Veth said. "I want to understand what you've built," she said, "before anyone else shows up to tell you what's wrong with it." There was a very long pause. "Nobody has asked that before," said Veth. "I figured," she said. The theoretical framework was stored on a device that Orm carried. A flat oblong thing that she might have mistaken for a piece of the quarry rock if it hadn't glowed when he activated it. The projection it produced was three-dimensional and color-coded in frequencies she could mostly see, and it took her a while to orient to the axial conventions they used, which were rotated 90 degrees from anything in her training. But the mathematics, once she found the translation layer, were not as foreign as she expected. They were smart. That was the first thing she registered. These were not the calculations of amateurs or fantasists. There were errors. Significant ones, in the assumptions about the Earth's core density and composition, which turned out to be a harder problem than most non-Earth species appreciated. But the architecture of the thinking was rigorous, creative, even. There was a particular approach to the resonance propagation problem that she had never seen before. A kind of harmonic folding that their physics apparently allowed for in ways human physics was still working out whether to permit. She said this to them, not because she was trying to be diplomatic, but because it was true, and she didn't see a reason not to say true things. Orm made a sound that the module translated, with moderate confidence, as something in the emotional register of relief. Veth was quieter. She had the sense that Veth was the one who had needed this more, but was less able to show it, which was a pattern she recognized from humans, and apparently crossed species boundaries. "The density estimates," she said, pulling up the relevant section. "You're working from orbital spectroscopy?" "Yes. It's a hard read from orbit. We have direct samples now. There's published data going back 30 years. I can share what I have." She looked at her field equipment. "I've got a general database on the pod. It's survey grade, not research grade, but it's more accurate than spectroscopy." She went and got her tablet and came back and sat down on the flat rock that had previously held the coffee cups, and they sat beside her. Orm immediately. Veth, after a moment's hesitation that she now understood as stylistic rather than reluctant. And she opened the database and showed them. It took 3 hours. In that time, the flat, gray sky darkened and lightened in the small fluctuations of cloud cover that passed for weather on this planet. And Mira's knees got cold and she got up twice to walk around. And Orm produced something from a compartment in his suit that turned out, after the module processed it, to be a food source. And he offered her some, and she accepted a small amount and ate it without tasting it much. And the world continued being a quarry around them while they worked. At the end of 3 hours, Veth sat back, or did the equivalent of sitting back, which involved a postural shift she had started to read as rest, and said, "The plan is not feasible as designed." "Not in its current form," she agreed. "The density problem propagates through the resonance model in ways that aren't recoverable without a redesign of the harmonic approach. The core data changes the fundamental parameters." "Yes," Orm made a sound. The module took a moment and then offered, mournful, uncertain. "It can be redesigned," she said. She was surprised to hear herself say it, and then surprised to find that she meant it. "The harmonic folding thing, the approach you're using for the resonance propagation. That's actually the interesting part. That's the thing I haven't seen before." Veth was looking at her with the stillness it used when it was processing something important. "You are not trying to stop us," it said. "I filed a report," she said. "Someone will follow up. That's the stopping part. I did the stopping part. This is the other part. The other part. The understanding part," she said, "which comes first usually, or should." The silence that followed was different from the earlier silences, less pressurized. She had the odd sense of something having been released, like pressure off a joint. "We have been doing this for a long time," Veth said, quietly. The module rendered it almost gentle. 40 years is a long time," she agreed. "We began because we were afraid," Veth said. She had the impression this was not something Veth said easily or often. "Our world was." A pause. The module waited, Contracting, resources, space. The systems that had sustained us were failing. We needed somewhere to go. So the planet ship idea, yes. If we could move a planet with resources, with atmosphere, a pause. We chose yours because the data on it was extensive. Because it seemed already inhabited by something that struggled and endured. She thought about that for a moment. You chose us because we looked like we knew how to survive. Something like that. She looked out across the quarry landscape. In the distance, one of the low ridges cast a shadow across the gray ground. And the shadow was almost interesting. A line where one kind of gray became a different kind of gray. She had been on this planet for less than 24 hours. And she had already noticed 17 things about its geology that she wanted to note down, and none of them were in the pre-drop scan data. Your world is contracting, she said. What does that mean exactly? Physically, another exchange between them, longer, quieter. Orm spoke for the first time at length, and the module worked hard and came back with a rough sketch. Atmospheric degradation over a long period, possibly seeded by industrial activity, possibly by something older, the origin debated. A cooling, a narrowing of the habitable band. Populations condensing toward equatorial regions that were themselves becoming unstable. She was listening carefully, the way she listened to rock faces. Not looking for the obvious, looking for the layered story underneath. How many of you are there? She asked. Your species. A number came back that the module flagged as uncertain in its translation. But she got the order of magnitude. Millions, not billions. A population that had already been through something. We have a department for this, she said. Not planet moving, but planetary climate intervention, atmospheric remediation. We've done it twice now, on a small scale. Our own planet needed some work a few decades ago. She said it without drama as a fact. We're not good at it, but we're getting better. She looked at Veth, who was very still. It would be a genuine research partnership, she said, not charity. You have the harmonic folding approach, which I want to understand better, and which I think has applications our people haven't explored. We have the atmospheric data and the remediation experience. It's an exchange. Orm's posture had changed. The module was not equipped to name what it was, but she had been watching humans in crisis and humans in the moment just after crisis her whole life, and she thought she recognized something in it. Veth spoke. The module took a long moment then. Why would you offer this? She thought about it seriously because it was a serious question. Because 40 years is a long time to spend trying to take something instead of asking for help, she said. And because you came out here and waited on a rock and told the first human you found what you were planning, which tells me you wanted a conversation more than you wanted a victory. She paused. And because your harmonic folding is genuinely interesting, and I want to know if it works. The last part made Orm do something the module translated as laughter, uncertain. Veth was quiet for a long moment, then it said, we did not expect this. That's usually how it goes, she said. She stood up and stretched her back, which had been complaining about the cold rock for an hour. The gray sky had shifted to something approaching late afternoon, though she wasn't sure about this planet's day length, and the light had taken on a quality that she reluctantly admitted was beautiful. Flat and silver, and very clean, the way high-altitude light was clean. The kind of light that made you see the precise edges of things. I need to do my samples before dark, she said, the mineral deposits I'm actually here for. She picked up her equipment. You could come if you want. The ridge formation to the northwest is interesting. If your planet has similar geology, there might be something relevant. She began walking. After a moment she heard them fall in behind her. Orm first, quick and close, and then Veth, measured and deliberate. She did not look back, she just kept walking. The mineral survey took 2.5 hours and covered 4 kilometers of terrain and was, by any objective measure, one of the better geological surveys she had conducted, partly because Veth turned out to have an excellent eye for strata and kept pointing out formations she had nearly walked past. Orm carried equipment without being asked. At one point they encountered a formation that she could not immediately classify, and she said so, and there was a long collaborative discussion during which Veth provided a frame of reference from its own planet's geology that she had never heard before, and that explained, in a way she found deeply satisfying, what she was looking at. She collected her samples, she made her notes, she filed the extension to her field report. On the way back to the pod, in the last of the silver light, Orm walked beside her and asked, through the module, what the planet they were going back to was like. She thought about how to answer this in a way that was honest. Crowded, she said, complicated. Often very loud, a pause. Also very good coffee, which I mentioned. And extremely good at surviving things it probably shouldn't survive. Orm made the sound the module had previously translated as laughter. We have heard this about humans, said Veth from behind. It's accurate, she said. At the pod, she ran through the shutdown checks for the external equipment and confirmed the transmission status of her reports. The burst channel had logged a receipt from the relay station, which meant someone was reading it, which meant the wheels of the process were turning. She did not know exactly who would come or when, but she knew the architecture of her organization well enough to know that priority one flags got answered. That was the one thing about bureaucracy she had always genuinely respected. It was slow, but it had memory, and it did not lose things. She turned around. Veth and Orm were standing at the edge of the pod's light, which threw their outlines in sharp relief against the gray dark. She looked at them for a moment. The follow-up team will have questions, she said. Better equipment than me. Proper xenological training. They'll want to start from the beginning. Your world, the timeline, what you need. We understand, said Veth. They might be annoying about process, she said. We often are. We have been waiting 40 years, said Veth. We can wait for process, she nodded. Give me your contact frequency. I'll put it in the report, and someone will reach out through the relay before the team arrives. They transmitted the frequency. She logged it. She looked up at the sky, which was fully dark now, and with some satisfaction that it was a very different dark from the one she was used to. Different star patterns, different density, a particular quality of absence where familiar constellations should have been. She had been doing this long enough that unfamiliar skies felt like a form of reading, and this one had things to say. One more question, she said. Yes, said Veth. Why here, she said. This planet. For the meeting, a pause. It resembles ours, said Veth, the landscape. Before the changes began, it was like this, gray and still and very clear. Another pause. We thought it would be easier to explain, if the place looked familiar. She looked out at the quarry landscape. The flat rock, the low ridges, the gray that went on until it met the dark. She thought about what it meant to pick a meeting place that looked like something you had lost, and what that said about the kind of homesickness that survived 40 years of waiting. I think that's the smartest thing you've done, she said. She went inside. She made coffee. She sat down at the field desk and looked at the external camera feed, which showed two figures standing in the dark outside, not moving, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. She worked on her report until she fell asleep, and in the morning they were still there. On the second day, she taught Veth the basic framework for atmospheric remediation modeling, using the software on her field tablet and the geological samples from the previous day as a substrate. It was not an ideal teaching environment. The software was designed for solo use, and the interface made no concessions to multi-limbed or differently sensory users. But Veth's ability to absorb structural frameworks was remarkable, and by midday it was running projections that were, while not accurate, at least aimed in the right direction. Orm spent most of the morning disassembling something from their equipment pile and then reassembling it in a slightly different configuration. She asked about it at lunch and he explained, through the module, that he was adjusting the resonance emitter, not to use it as designed, but to repurpose part of it as a long-range transmitter that would work on frequencies compatible with the relay network. She looked at the modification. Then she looked at Orm. That's going to work, she said. Orm made the laughter sound. On the third day, the morning of her scheduled departure, she ran her final equipment checks and loaded her samples and confirmed her landing window with the orbital relay. The sky was the same gray it had been every day, the light the same flat silver, the rocks around the pod unmoved and uninterested. She walked the perimeter one last time of the sensors, more out of ritual than necessity, and then stood for a moment at the edge of her survey zone and looked north, where the interesting formation was, and south, where the quarry floor was flattest, and thought about geology. Veth was waiting by the pod when she came back. Orm was on the ridge. At his station, she thought, in the way you thought about someone at the place they were meant to be. The follow-up team will contact you within 12 days, she said. If there's a delay, push back. Priority 1 means 12 days, and you're allowed to hold them to it. We will, said Veth. The harmonic folding, she said. Write it up properly. Full documentation. With your mathematical notation, I'll send you a template that should translate. Whoever they send will want the complete theoretical framework before they can assess the partnership potential. Spot. I understand. She picked up her field kit and looked at Veth for a moment. 40 years is a long time to believe in something, she said. Yes, said Veth, Don't let them hurry you, she said. The process people. They'll want to move fast once they see the harmonic work. Make sure they understand the stakes on your end. Make them be careful. Veth's stillness shifted into something she had learned, over 3 days, to read as attention. The specific quality of being understood. You are not what we expected, it said. What did you expect? A pause, fear, defiance, a refusal. Those are all options, she said. They didn't seem like the right ones. She walked up the pod ramp and keyed the airlock. At the top she turned and looked back. Veth was standing below, looking up at her. Orm had descended from the ridge and was standing beside it, and they were both very still, outlined against the gray sky. She raised her hand. After a moment, Orm raised his. She went inside and closed the airlock and ran the launch sequence with the brisk efficiency of long practice, and the pod lifted on its bent strut, which held, as she had thought it probably would, and pushed up through the thin atmosphere and into the dark. In the orbital relay, 12 hours later, her Priority 1 report was already being read by someone who had the authority to act on it. She knew this because the relay flagged active engagement on the file, which was the most bureaucratic possible way to indicate that history was being made, and she had always found this funny. She pulled up the harmonic folding projections she had copied from Veth's device and looked at them again in the better light of the relay station. They were still interesting. More interesting, actually, now that she could see them without the cold and the gray pressing in from all sides. There was something in them that she kept almost understanding. A shadow of a principle that her own physics had been circling for years without finding the right angle. She made a note. Then she made coffee and went to find whoever was on duty, because someone needed to be told about this in person, and she had found, in a long career of finding things in unlikely places, that the most important discoveries were always the ones that arrived looking like something ordinary. A gray planet, a flat sky, 2 figures on a ridge. And turned out, when you sat down with them in the cold and asked what they were actually made of, to be something else entirely. Something worth knowing, something worth the time.